Chapter 29. Wings of Parae. Reignited, Paros heaves his devouring shadow upon me like a swooping predator from above, and with it, his incendiary might. Gripping onto the stalk of his fungal home, stretched from it by one arm, Pyros spews a hyper-pressurized flow of lava towards my standing. The rushing super stream slices into the island effortlessly, yet all at once vigorously. The eternal flame alters its path to the tune of my evasion, zigzagging across the singed plain, bringing to ash what little vegetation there was. I'm impressed that he can keep up with me in this form. However, the keeper of the key will gain an advantage ought I remain grounded. With this realization, I take to the air for better mobility. Whom command? Astral arrow! The fiery chimera inhales deeply and then exhales a great cloud of steam spanning so large of an area that it swallows the island whole. My arrow is lost in the thick white mist. In an attempt to commandeer the natural around me for the purpose of locating Pyros, as I learned to do in the Koth, to my bewilderment, I find that there is a near lack thereof. I feel only that of the mushrooms and the plant life beneath them. Apart from this, the island has been blackened. Pyros' own is dominant and all at once undetectable in its source, for it pervades across the island, camouflaged by flame and concealed by fire. Emerging from beneath me as a voracious carnivore from the depths of the buoyant white moisture, the steam clashes upwards as the beast grips my legs and throws me back into the surface. The force of the impact is so considerable that I flutter in flashes between blackness and consciousness for but a split second, rebounding from the escaping momentum. If it weren't for the second collision coming down from my bounce, I would not have reawoken. What is this infernal rock composed of? My mass in this state, in conjunction with Pyros' prodigious hurl, ought to have been adequate to penetrate it. Nevertheless, my unstable and expeditious descent scarcely make a mark on the isle. Though the rock is not dented, the explosive collision rippled through the air with a resounding vehemence and banished the accumulated steam, sending it forth all directions unto the sea. I have little time to regain my breath as Pyros cascades before me with his hammering fists following subsequently. I roll out of the way just in time. His stamina is reminiscent of Hakor's. How can one exude this magnitude of and at such a size without tiring is thrilling. What am I thinking? Am I enjoying this? Yes! Ha! I could practically hear myself chuckling inside my head. I believe that I am indeed enjoying myself. I used to fear fighting those more powerful than I. Now, I find an exhilaration about it. This indubitably is my ancestor spirit replenishing me with a fresh sense of rhapsody, a novel source of pleasure, and a heightened seat of war-gotten wisdom. The further our journey progresses and unfolds, the more pages of Parae reveal themselves to me. With a flash and flood of newfound pride, I do something that I have never thought to do before. In place of an astral arrow, I morph that very same affinity to bring forth a melee weapon. The idea has bubbled up and arisen from the depths of my subconscious, as though this was not an act of will or critical thought, but rather a forgotten instinct, relearned and reborn. Command! Star Eater! I let loose the war cry of its impeccable conception. With my innovative, cosmic-based chain and mace, derivative of my astral style, I flail and strike Pyros' jaw with the complete impetus of my ancestral originator as the legendary beast charges forth. The decisive attack lays him down. Pyros rises from his drubbing, snorting in anger. He glares at me and I at him. The stare-down becomes as though a mason or a layer of bricks stacks and accumulates the tension by the piece and by the second, and by the ripples in the flow of our competitive zeal.
I thought you said you were weak.
Pyros bursts into tears, rolling in his banter. I said no such thing. You were the accuser of my frailty. Strength is not something that lies in the sole custody of the individual. There's a shared power in numbers and in friendship, and this is why it is that Saba has lent me his hand in this grand quest. With an otherworldly swiftness, Pyros brings his joyous moment to a halt.
Fool! You know nothing of the wealth of your potential, and if you do, to seek aid outside of it must be some despicable jest.
The steam escaping his snort rebounds from its clash with the stony foundation beneath him. I make no jest. If there is such a power within me still untapped, I have no inkling of its whereabouts nor how to go about unlocking it. I reply earnestly, all the while thinking, did not Parae have you, O eternal flame? Pyros sighs.
So be it. Let us turn up the heat and see whether I may help you find this power.
The beast grins. Pyros pounds his chest and roars, smashes the ground and hops about violently. The furs of his back spike outwardly, frantically wavering with the blur from the generated smolder. His enthusiastic craze is no mere tactic of intimidation. He is boiling his blood of magma and fanning the feverish flame within him. What was unbearable before would be a luxury to bask in compared to these temperatures. I soar high into the sky in hopes to penetrate his dome of fire. Trailing behind me are heaps of the island's crust, catapulted and tracing my wake by the dynamic monster's might. Pyros is strong enough to dig into whatever insanely dense mix of ingots this island is composed of. Truly, his vigor is frightening. I maneuver about the twirling stones with relative ease. I cannot fight him within his charring orb. As heat-resistant as I've become, what transpires around his core nullifies my short-lived advantage. Even here, at its outskirts, the parts of my skin lacking scales have become scorched. It appears that Saba has retreated from this molten death trap as well. He's far enough to be safe, but not so far that he cannot discern the affair of our duel. What are my options? I could use my line of fire command in its fullest, and likely level the surface. Mushrooms, pyros, and all. But the goal is not to kill him. I need to know where the key is. I could muster all of my ability at the utmost extent of my speed and try to finish him with my star reader. However, were I to miss, I would likely melt and liquefy before I could muster and execute a second swing. Saba gravitates over to me whilst upon a platform of jagged ore that he has repurposed from the island. Listen, I know well that you believe that I cannot handle myself, but give me some more time. I still reserve some fight in me yet. I do not allow him the opportunity to offer his aid.
This is not why I came. It would dishonor my warriorhood as well as yours if I chose to interfere in a duel that I was explicitly told would be one against the other.
What is it, then? I do not know how much longer he'll wait around for me. I motion for him to quickly establish his point.
I came simply to offer my advice. Your wings, they are powerful. I've witnessed their gust. Could you, by the ability of your race, apply some of your to it as a sort of supplemental mechanism?
This was such a simple and obvious theory, and yet it hadn't occurred to me in the slightest. I am always so intent on developing complex stratagems that I have consigned to oblivion the base fundamentals. He's right. We, the Omani, may apply our and concentrate it within specific limbs and organs to momentarily enhance their performance. I never thought to administer to my wings because they are fresh, foreign appendages, and I haven't yet experienced a need to do such a thing, but it makes perfect sense. Pyros slingshots 2 more hefty chunks of rock our way. I nod to Saba. He nods in return, then glides to safety. I parade around the stone, again with ease. Pyros' stream of lava likely cannot reach thus far, thus the beast resorts to its primitive brute strength instead. All right, then. Let's do this. I concentrate an extensive bulk of my into my Draken appendages. They react with a tingling pulsation. Right. They feel even more like my wings now. I extend them backwards, and with all of my might, with all of my focus, I clap them forth, sending a weighty gale, incomparable in its intensity even to Z's sonic clap, to breach the fiery dome of Pyros. And it is a stupendous success. The force is irrepressible. It shatters the dome, disperses the heat across the Uman, and compels Pyros to hug the turf so tightly you would think he's been seasick and just came upon land for the first time in decades. Even the colossal fungi appear to briefly bend the knee as the wind forces them to fold. However, their material composition allows them to recoil with an elastic buoyancy. Determining it safe to do thus, I begin my descent back to the island's surface. Pyros recollects his senses. Shaking his head from the stun, he rises from his groveling.
That was more like it. More like Parae.
The beast applauds my force as it kneads the ground. Shall we continue? Or have you so soon come to the conclusion that I am not what you have claimed? I stand resolutely before him. Pyros humbly bows his head.
My master has returned.
Saba arrives at the scene. I can comprehend well enough how it is that you ejected yourself from the island during Pyros' establishing of his feverish dome. But how on Oma did the oxygen not get sucked from your lungs during your retreat? I was nearly sapped myself, and I took flight with a great haste. I looked to him.
The air pockets I conjured prior were coincidentally more convenient than I had hoped for them to be.
Ah, that's right. I hadn't the need to use mine as I just flew up and out of range before Pyros could disperse his deadly fumes in their fullness. I gesture a nod of admiration to Saba, then redirect my focus to Pyros. Hidden is my maturing suspicion of my journeying companion, for he so conveniently has predicted too much for coincidence. But it shall be addressed in due course. The key, I firmly demand of him. The beast stands, looks about in a brief hesitation, then turns to the primary mushroom. Approaching it, Pyros ascends to the top and we follow promptly. Walking atop the rubbery, wet cap of the giant fungi feels surreal. The sensation of its substance through my skin-to-skin contact with it feels as though I walk through undisturbed waters, and even though I can move or thrash about it, its form adjusts to my touch. Such tranquil, anti-fragile
Help yourself to a bite.
Pyros instructs. Huh? I'm perplexed, and this is saying the least.
Take a bite of the cap.
Pyros says again, this time enunciating clearly and slowly. But why? I stare at the fuzzy head of the shroom with a fresh aversion.
Do you seek the key, or was it all a tease?
The eternal flame snarls. I pinch a piece from the cap's surface and sniff it. Ugh, perhaps there's another way. The smell of it is repugnant, a contrast from its pleasant texture and
There is not,
he says impatiently. I stare the portion of fungi down as though it were conscious, and as though I could somehow intimidate it into tasting better than it smells. Shutting my eyes and plugging my nose, I swallow it without chewing. Immediately my head begins to throb and pulsate violently, and my heart pumps profusely without rest. My knees buckle, and I drunkenly stumble until I fall onto my back. This feels similar to the sensation induced by the Silver Creek's waters, absent the burning sensation. My stomach churns like the Uman Sea under a fierce storm. I sweat copiously, dripping a bucket's worth of my being from each and every pore alike. The humidity cascades from me. Within minutes, I'm turned over, heaving and vomiting. As I recollect myself and find my breathing kneeled over, I catch a glimmer in the grotesque pool of my regurgitation. It cannot be. It is a golden key.